Hi, friends. This episode of Big Blue Banter is brought to you by Prize Picks. Head on over to Prize Picks and use promo code BANTER, and they'll match up to $100 on a new deposit. Thank you and enjoy.
Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneider, joined as always my co-host Nick Filato. Tonight we're here to do it, the first draft profile of draft season. Now that we're getting the first in, a lot more coming. We already have a few names we're discussing. We're going to start at the top of the board, and we're going to get into some other draft content like you see every season. As you've seen in the past, our plan is the same as it's been every year, a podcast a day in April. We don't plan to do less, maybe more. We'll see what happens there. We're going to try to get some more guests lined up as well to talk NFL draft. We're going to do prospect profiles. We're going to do him versus that, top fives at positions, all the fun content that we've done in the past and new stuff. If you got new ideas for us as far as what you want to hear us cover from the draft, hit us up. Let us know. Find us on Twitter. Tell us what you want to hear. Tell us what you want to see covered. But today is our first draft profile, and it's a player that I'm really excited to cover, Nick, because he, after spending even more time watching him, now I did my initial watch probably maybe a month ago, but for these profiles, I try to get back into it and watch at least 3, maybe 4 games. And today I had some time to really watch some games, and I got in 3 more games of this player and just got really excited about what I was seeing. And I'll tell you this, Nick, this player has moved all the way up for me, Nick. This is kind of crazy, to number 4 on my big board for the Giants. And remember, this is just a specific board for what the Giants, for if they were the Giants. And that means he's ahead of one of those 3 quarterbacks because he's not ahead of Marvin Harrison Jr. for me. So we'll talk about that as well. But this player is Malik Nabers, the wide receiver from LSU. And Nick, I just saw this when I looked at your draft profile that you put up for Athlon Sports, Sports Illustrated. I don't know what they're actually referred to as now. You can correct me on that. But you gave him almost the tier below an all-pro grade. And let me just say this for anyone who's followed Nick's profiles on the draft that he does for Sports Illustrated / Athlon Sports over the last few years. He has some of the hardest grading scale I've ever seen. He's like a John Ledyard. He's like the step below John Ledyard. You know, John Ledyard won't give a single edge a good grade, and he hates all edges. He's always good. And I love it because like that's what good analysts, good film analysts do. They're not going to give great grades. But Nick gave a very high grade for Malik Nabers, higher than I'm used to seeing. So go ahead, Nick.
So I'd say it's 2 steps below the All-Pro. I have Marvin Harrison Jr. just below All-Pro. Because 7.3 on this grading scale that we use, that is All-Pro. I have Marvin Harrison Jr. at a 7.28, and then Malik Nabers I have at a 7.12.
Okay.
And there's not a lot not to love about Malik Nabers. He's not the biggest, right? I can understand why some may suggest, just because he's being talked about in the top 5, look, he's not necessarily the most domineering or commanding player at the catch point. He's fine at the catch point. He's perfectly functional at the catch point. He is wildly explosive. The potential that he has as a route runner is through the roof because of the micro movements, because of how he can release off the line of scrimmage, because he can turn on a dime. All of the athletic traits that he possesses are going to unlock, I think, his immense potential. And we've only seen just glimpses of it at LSU. That's what I hope, at least, if he does come to the New York Giants, right? Because he was running free how much at LSU? He was kicking ass for Jaden Daniels. And I can read the synopsis, which is not really a synopsis. It's actually pretty damn expansive. But I feel like I'd be talking for a while if I were to do that.
Well, you can work it in. Let's bake it in throughout, like do like little bits and pieces of it,
Gotcha.
I guess, as we talk through it when you see it kind of get to the picture. But I want to start with like an overall thought on just some things that we've seen and read about Malik Nabers from around the NFL. And it starts with, what Adam Schefter said, which was, there are some personnel executives that believe that he's the wide receiver 1 in this class over Marvin Harrison Jr. And what's insane to me is, you say he's the wide receiver 1 in a different class, and it is what it is. I can easily see it being the case. Malik Nabers, I tweeted this earlier, but Malik Nabers will be my wide receiver 1 in 7 of the last 10 draft classes. That's how good he is. But to say he's potentially not say potentially, say he is for some of these execs, their wide receiver 1 over Marvin Harrison Jr. I know Marvin Harrison Jr. isn't the most explosive prospect. He isn't the best after the catch. He isn't the fastest, but everything else he does is like Larry Fitzgerald levels of elite for a college prospect, things that you just shouldn't see from a college player from a production standpoint, not just from a production standpoint, from like a development standpoint, I would say, for someone that young. So to have anyone believe that he should be wide receiver 1 over Harrison says something, but Dane Brugler said some of the personnel execs he's spoken with believe he's the top prospect overall in his entire draft class. That's Malik Nabers. So I just wanted to set the tone with that. I want to discuss a little bit of his background, Nabers. He was a dominant high school basketball player as well as high school football player. He caught 58 passes for 1,223 yards and 21 touchdowns as a junior in high school, originally committed to go to Mississippi State, but at the end came back around and went to his hometown state, LSU. He grew up in Louisiana. Something people like a lot about these receivers, Nick, was two stats. One, his yards per route run over 365. And as you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, Nick's running some of the tape, which is awesome. I love when we do this. 365, 364 yards per route run, a really predictive stat. Also, he broke out during his age 19 campaign. A lot of people do believe that breaking out early is a very big factor in projection from college to the NFL. What was your breakout age? Were you able to dominate at a young age against older prospects? If you're 19 playing the way Malik Nabers did, you're going against some 21-year-olds, some 22-year-olds, some with the COVID years, some 23, 24-year-olds. And Nick, he also became the second receiver in LSU history to do what? And this is also something, by the way, before I give you this stat and let you guess, this is something Odell Beckham was unable to do and Jarvis Landry was unable to do. Now, part of that is because of the system they ran in and the offense they ran in. But what did he become the second LSU receiver ever to do?
To have 1,000 yards.
Yes, back-to-back 1,000
two consecutive seasons. Yeah.
Good job, by the way. I didn't think you would. I just put that out of nowhere for you. I guess it kind of tipped it off, but man, this player, when I watch him, he moved all the way up to, like I said, number 4 on my big board for the Giants. I would take him over J.J. McCarthy for sure for me right now, Nick. And I would probably take him over Jaden Daniels, having watched more Jaden Daniels, just getting into watching Malik Nabers. I just feel that strongly about him as a prospect. You said it best, but I think Josh Norris said this, so I want to break this down before we get into a little bit of the film and then of, I guess, some of your synopsis. He said to him, Nick, after looking at his pro day numbers, and tell me what you think about this, he views Malik Nabers as a jetpack version of Brandon Ayuk. They're near the exact same size. Ayuk ran a 4.5 40. Nabers ran a 4.38. Nabers had a little bit better of a vertical at 42-inch, but Ayuk was great there. A 10.9 broad, a little bit better. And I think, as anyone could see just from watching these two, he's a different player, a more explosive player, like a jetpack version after the catch. But I just wanted to bring this one up, Nick, to you, because who is the wide receiver who I've been fiending about over the last 2 years the Giants potentially trading for? It's Brandon Ayuk, a wide receiver who's so much better than people realize on tape and so much better in the minds of NFL execs and coaches than the stats show because of the system he plays in. And so I'm getting a jetpack version of him potentially. It's hard for me to want to take, anyone but Drake May, Caleb Williams, and Marvin Harrison Jr. over a player like this.
I think that's well put too, man. I'm really excited about the prospects of Malik Nabers. And if you're watching on YouTube, you saw some of the plays, contested catches, acrobatic highlight reel catches, and also just some of the routes that he runs and how he is deceptive. We talk about deceptiveness up your stem and your ability to sink your hips and then explode directly out of it while maintaining momentum and not like popping up or kind of having a hitch in your step. Malik Nabers is very smooth in that. He's buttery smooth. He can bend. He's flexible. He can contort his body to make those crazy catches, and his acceleration in that second gear. Those are all aspects of his game that are rare, I would say, right? Like there are receivers that have come out in the past, and there are receivers in this draft class that are a little bit more explosive than Malik Nabers, but they don't have the full complement or the full package. And Nabers might be the most explosive. Like you look at someone like Xavier Worthy, he has that top end speed. He's a pretty explosive guy. Troy Franklin as well, but they're not nearly as nuanced as Malik Nabers. And I still think Malik Nabers, I still think there is more to his game that can be unlocked too. That's one of the reasons why we're so excited about him. Like the first part of my synopsis, I'll read these in parts if you want. Yeah. I said, Malik Nabers is a wildly agile route runner with elite flexibility and burst, a nightmare to guard in one-on-one situations. Everything Nabers does on the football field is sudden. His movements and release, how he can quickly explode out of his micro movements to tie up defensive backs, and even how he secures passes and quickly finds the advantageous path to create yards after the catch. Few receivers possess his level of twitch with his bend and fluidity that allows him to sell or disguise breaks and cuts. His ability to keep cornerbacks guessing and on their toes, quite literally in some cases, is one of the many reasons why he's being discussed as a top 5 pick.
Yeah, I love that synopsis, and it's how I see it too. And it's something that goes back to what you said in your first initial take when we first got started on this show, which was that it's the way, it's his upside. And again, what we always talk about when it comes to these prospects is a lot of this is a projection. Like we don't really want them to be what they are now on film. We want to see what they're able to be at the NFL level based on their traits. And based on his ability, those micro movements and that ability to sink his hips, to bend, just to change direction so fast. And then also just to have that 4.38 speed. And it's obvious on tape, that burst. It makes him a possible projection to win at all three levels of the NFL. And there's not a lot of receivers who have the projection, because you think of some of like the vertical wins that Odell Beckham had when he was with the Giants. Think back to the Miami Dolphins game. Do you remember the route he ran, that double post corner, I think it was, against the Dolphins? I saw Malik Nabers run a very similar route and get open for LSU touchdown. I'm watching the Missouri game today, and he should have had a 45-yard touchdown when he's running a slot vert and just absolutely destroys the defensive back. Every defensive back that plays him, Nick, has to give him cushion. And if you do give him that cushion, he's so good at understanding the space that he can cut under that cushion, waste no space while doing so. I saw him do this twice against Missouri, and then catch a ball. And then once he catches the ball in space, he understands all the angles, so he can create as the maximum amount of yards after contact. In addition to understanding all the angles and having the burst, he's able to bounce off contact. No one ever tackles him on the first attempt. Matt Harmon talked about this, who, reception charts receivers. He said, he's everything the Kadarius Toney bros wanted Kadarius Toney to be from a contact balance standpoint and from a after the catch force missed tackle standpoint. And now me and you kind of disagree to some extent with that, because Toney was almost like watching Alvin Kamara out there, and no one really did it like him. But when you factor in everything else that Malik Nabers did to also have that ability to be able to be that good at contact balance and creating after contact, in addition to understanding all the angles, utilizing them, maximizing them, bursting through them, he wins at every single level. I saw him make some comeback routes where he won. There was one comeback route against Missouri. I'm just bringing up this game because I just see it right first in my notes, where he ran against Missouri, where like I watch to see, Nick, if they're pushing off when they're running those comeback routes, because a lot of the receivers do. He created a maximum amount of separation without even pushing off, just with his ability to throttle down and break back toward the quarterback. Now, there are some issues I have with him from what I saw on his tape, which we can get into at some point, but they're very nitpicky, to be honest with you, man. When I look at it, they're not something I see really impacting him in any way. And I always feel like when it comes to the negatives and the weaknesses, I always think that I'm more focused on the positives and what they can be. So, for example, there were some concentration drops, if you want to get into those, which I felt like were less to do with him not catching the football properly and more just, concentration drops. But some of what he's able to do is insane.
Let me get into this second part of the not so synopsis. Nabers is outstanding of creating yards after the catch, and he has the home run ability to take a slant for 6, similar to former LSU Tiger Odell Beckham Jr. But there's still plenty of meat on the bone of development for Nabers as a route runner. His route running upside is immense for several reasons, which we will detail throughout this podcast. But I wouldn't say he's consistently maximizing the leverage he creates or can create. He doesn't always stack after winning at the line of scrimmage with that lateral release method that he uses. I want to get into that in a little bit. And he sometimes rounds his breaks. It's not always crisp. It's not the biggest deal, and it can be cleaned up, in my opinion. But those are aspects that, like, if he cleans that up, you're talking about even more separation. He's already creating a lot of separation at the college level in the SEC, and I don't really have any issue with his ability to create separation. And I think he can be a little bit more physical. Like, he is more physical than what I perceived going into his film at the break point. And you really saw that in the Arkansas game. And this is one aspect of his game that, look, I'll get into it right now. His infrequency of battling press coverage with his hands and physicality was tested against Arkansas in 2023. We saw a little bit against Auburn as well. It didn't matter much. His Nabers caught 8 passes for 130 yards with 2 touchdowns, but there was a coaching point for Arkansas to get on Nabers quickly at the line of scrimmage. Nabers also caught 2 curl passes when he was getting harassed at the stem. I think I showed one of them on the YouTube a little bit before. Despite his success against Arkansas, though, he has to prove and develop ways to defeat more physical press cornerbacks to scratch his immense potential. So let's get into this part. When you're watching Malik Nabers, and this is the negative portion, if you will, when he is on the line of scrimmage, he typically uses a lateral release, maybe a jab step to set up and open a cornerback a certain way, and then he explodes in the other direction. And the explosiveness is palpable, man. You can really sense it and you can really feel it. But you never really see, like you'll see Marvin Harrison Jr. use his hands and quickly just shed a press technique or a jab. He always tries to avoid it and run around. And it's exceptional how he's able to kind of contort his body and bend around the contact. But I need to see, or I want to see him use his hands, physically create that separation, because at the NFL level, they're going to be trying to get into his chest when he's on the line of scrimmage. They're going to be trying to dictate and physically impose themselves on Malik Nabers. And that's one aspect of his evaluation that I didn't consistently see. I did not see him really use or defeat press coverage with his hands. And he kind of always just relied on his exceptional athletic ability to run around it. And even when he would do that, I didn't feel like he consistently stacked on top of those cornerbacks, right? To further create that separation and that easier throwing window for Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I felt like most of what he did was, like you said, off either the jab step or the fake jab step, or just that speed release, that vertical speed, whatever you want to call it, vertical release, speed release. But I will say this with regards to that, and he is a physical player. Like, you could see it after the catch, and you can see it sometimes when he's like at the top of his route, getting off the kind of the press or the coverage of a corners, because he'll use his hands sometimes to do that. So I think it's in there, and I think it's capable of that, Nick. And I know you're saying that as well. It's just something he's going to have to practice. But I will say this, as far as like the speed release, vertical release goes, I feel like Antonio Brown made a career of that, like just using that as his only move. And it kind of just works. Like, if you're that good at it, I don't know if you can even get your hand, but you're right. NFL cornerbacks are going to be so much better. We always talk about this. The SEC, it's amazing. It's great. He's playing at the highest level, and it's still nothing anywhere close to what he's going to be facing at the NFL level from a cornerback standpoint, because only 64 people play on the outside at corner every game. So I think that's definitely an interesting, and I would love to see him use his physicality a little bit more on the line of scrimmage. I thought what you said second was really interesting, because that was something I noted as well. Like, he wins vertically a lot, but he doesn't do a great job of stacking the corner. He's just basically relying on his athleticism a lot of the times on those vertical routes, which is fine. It worked for him at the collegiate level. But like you said, at the NFL level, things change, and you really have to be just so technically proficient at all times, because there's not a lot of space to work with. And that's something I noticed a lot with watching more Malik Nabers. It's like, he's operating in a lot of space that I don't necessarily think will be available to him at the NFL level. It's something I noticed when I watched Jaden Daniels too in this offense. It's like, how much of this is translatable on the vertical plane? But I think what is translatable is his ability to create that separation with his feet, and with how fast he can release, and just that overall speed. And I want to talk about one thing on the vertical plane. I think you just showed a clip that did a great example of it. The one you showed before this, it's not this one, but I do like, kind of, with the exception of like, he can do a better job of stacking, I do like how he does a really good job of or at least in some of the clips that I've seen in some of the film that I went over, of showing late hands on the vertical route tree, like being able to kind of present your hands late so the cornerback doesn't have a good idea of where to go to break the football up. So there are some nuances to his game that aren't just within like the route running realm that I think are definitely worth talking about. And as far as tracking the ball on the vertical plane, this is something we discussed a lot with Jalen Hyatt last year, and how great of a job he did a couple years ago with Josh Palmer. I think he does a really good job of tracking on the vertical plane as well. I wanted to get your take on that, because it's not something you've discussed yet.
No, absolutely. Tracking and adjusting. And I'm going to try to find some clips to highlight this. This is just some yak clips that they're coming up against Florida, which is really apt, because we brought up Kadarius Toney's name a little bit ago. I have like 4 or 5 of these in the archive, but you can see how he just slips right around. And then it's that acceleration in that second gear. Like, that's a defensive back who tries to take this angle on him. I believe that's a defensive back. Yeah, number 20. And look, he just erases it. The guy dives and tries it. There's no chance. Like that's the kind of speed and the kind of acceleration that gets you to an all-pro type level, that gets you to the Pro Bowl type level, because it's a game of inches. All you need is just a little bit of leverage to get past a defensive player, and you're gone. And he has that type of burst and that type of explosiveness, which we've seen so many LSU receivers have. But some of these clips I have shown right now, man, you see the tracking and you see the concentration. You see some strength at the catch point too, which is still like, yes. I don't think he doesn't have the strength at the catch point like a Marvin Harrison Jr. He doesn't have the strength at the catch point like a Roma Dunes. A few receivers do, really. Like, that's not necessarily something, but it's not weak either. He's not weak at the catch point. He's just not as physically dominant as most receivers who are drafted in the top 5 are. So that's not necessarily a concern for me. But yes, the tracking, concentration, he has all of that, body adjustment. I'm going to try to find some of those clips as you talk, though, too.
Yeah, and I want to discuss a few other traits in his game that I saw on tape. I'm going to go back to this play I saw in the Missouri game, and then another play I saw in the Florida game. I feel like one thing that he doesn't get a lot of credit for, that he does a really good job of, is catching and making the play on off-target throws. And there was a catch he made in the Missouri game where it was kind of like he ran a stop route, and then it was kind of a scramble drill where he ran and cut back to the inside. And Jaden Daniels threw him a ball that was well behind him while he was running full speed, cutting horizontally across the horizontal plane. He turned his body in midair, was able to make this catch behind him on a throw that was well behind him, caught it, and then adjusted his body to potentially make some yardage after the catch. Now a DB or a safety, I think it was, kind of went up and made the tackle right after, which he almost bounced off of as well, which is insane. But he does a much better job when it comes to concentration and adjusting his body and the ability to have body control in the air than I think people give him credit for. And I mentioned earlier that I see some concentration drops in his tape. I really think that's all it comes down to. I don't think it's an issue with his technique or with his hands, because, you know, there are some times where you see him let the ball come into him and he's not always a hands catcher. But at the same time, Nick, he only had 5 drops on 128 targets in 2023 and 4 drops on 100 in 2022. That is a very low drop rate. Even Marvin Harrison had a higher drop rate in 2023, and he doesn't drop any passes, it feels like, when you watch Marvin Harrison. So I think those are 2 aspects of his game that maybe are going a little bit underrated.
I think here's the play you were just referencing.
Yes.
It's a quick little spot route. He feels the coverage. Also shows football IQ here, right? Like, where's the leverage? Where's the coverage?
Right.
I know I got a linebacker to my inside on the hash.
That, by the way.
Yes. And then look, there's 4 eyes on Malik Nabers right here, who's stagnant. So he feels the play, sees that Jaden Daniels is buying time, so he flows away from Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels is plenty athletic enough to throw against the grain, throw against his body, and locate Malik Nabers. He's like, okay, there's going to be plenty of space now inside. So that's what Malik Nabers does. And the throw is off target because that's a difficult throw. Jaden Daniels, but look, secures it, corrals it, and then gets upfield very quickly.
Pounces off the first dude. Like, he's going. He's probably going. If that first dude doesn't tackle him, no one tackles him on. That's another thing about his game, dude. Nobody tackles him on first hit. It feels like at the college level. It's actually kind of insane for the kind of contact balance and strength he has, core strength he has. But man, this dude is just like to me, like an unbelievable prospect.
Yeah, he really is, man. And the Giants have a realistic shot to land him, and that's one of the many things about this draft that make me excited. And I also just want to see how the roster kind of rounds out and everything like that. But this is a player who, like, again, we haven't had a receiver like this since Odell Beckham Jr. You know, and I'm not saying that he is Odell, but that'd be a lazy comp, but he has a similar play style.
Odell to him. Maybe not full Odell in some ways. Maybe the leaping ability is not Odell-like. That it's not that level, but I'll tell you what, he's a stronger prospect than Odell was, and he's got better contact balance than me. Now, he's not as, you know, like I said, he doesn't leap like Odell did. I don't think he runs the vertical tree the way Odell did. And I think one thing about Odell that people really maybe underrated just because the athleticism was so high was he was a really technical and proficient route runner across the full tree. Like the things that you mentioned, like you'd love to see him do a better job of stacking the DB on the vertical plane. That's not something you ever had to worry about with Odell, I don't think, when he was coming out film-wise. Like, I loved his tape. But you know, there are aspects of Odell in his game. And I think you brought up something that I'm happy you mentioned. I want to just reiterate because it's really interesting. He has a much higher football IQ than I think people realize too. And you talked about it when you see it against zone coverage all the time. Like, his spatial awareness against zone is phenomenal. It's phenomenal. It's something that you think is somebody who's a veteran playing this position. So I don't think he's all athlete by any means.
No, he's not all athlete. And we picked a little bit and got nitpicky with some of the nuance aspects of running his route, but it's not like he's inept at it, right? Like, he is technically proficient in some areas, just not to the level, like I said before, of a top 5 pick. And that's how we are grading him right now, because that's what Dan and I both have him. If you look at the top of the screen, this is another thing I love about receivers who can do this, because there's not a lot of receivers who can do this. And that is create immediate separation on the line of scrimmage, right? Yes. And if you look at the top of your screen, watch how he sells this. Just a bunch of little steps inside, stays square, and then gets that cornerback's hips oriented inward, and then just explodes outward. And it's that speed out of your break on the line of scrimmage or near the line of scrimmage that creates a big throwing window for Jaden Daniels. That's a lot of separation when you're up in press coverage against a cornerback that is created. And Jaden Daniels puts his ball up, back shoulder, easy pitch and catch. And Malik Nabers has that ability to create the separation in tight coverage on the line of scrimmage with his release. He has the ability to create separation in zone because he has that spatial awareness and the ability to pick through the zone coverage and understand where the voided areas are. And due to his athletic ability, he can create separation off of man coverage. So you're talking about a guy who can create separation in a multitude of different ways. He can win in a multitude of different ways at each level of the field, and somebody who has reliable enough hands, who's explosive, and the Giants could get him, which would be fun.
Yeah, and a couple other things I want to discuss with you, Nick, that I noticed in his tape, and this is one that you're always going to see if you watch the tape of these receivers. You're going to watch a lot of run plays too, and I feel like he gives pretty damn good effort as a blocker. I wanted to hear your take on that because I sometimes watch some of these receivers that don't give the best effort as a blocker, and I tend to not care too much about it. I think most of your job as a receiver is to win your routes. But then again, you look at teams that have really established what we talked about earlier, Nick, which was that ability to marry the run game with the pass game. You look at the 49ers, the Rams, the Texans, some of the best offenses. They have these great blocking wide receivers too, like Brandon Ayuk, who you mentioned earlier, who gives max effort and allows you to kind of have a run game that's successful and that you can rely on, that can, again, marry to the pass game. So what were your thoughts on his effort as a blocker?
Yeah, I appreciate his effort as a blocker. There was one play, I can't remember who it was against. It's one of those really long Jaden Daniels touchdowns where Jaden Daniels got the edge, and who was out there blocking for him? It was Malik Nabers, man. Like Malik Nabers was out there throwing a dirty block and I mean dirty as in a good one, not something that would cause laundry. But he's physical. It seems like he takes some pride in doing so. And I just want somebody who's aggressive and who takes pride, because we've seen receivers. I mean, Odell Beckham Jr. was one of these receivers who wasn't necessarily taking all the pride in the world when he was blocking. I don't think he was a bad blocker. I think when it was play side, he was running. But there were a lot of times when I was watching Odell Beckham Jr., when I first started watching tape, where he was on the backside of a play and he's just kind of
a lot of times.
Yeah, so like I didn't see that.
Wasn't Sterling Shepard out there? That wasn't like watching that as a blocker.
I loved Shep as a blocker, man. Shep was good enough to do Y insert.
I know,
which is something
I ever saw Odell Beckham run a single Y insert, by the way.
Well, different offense.
Different offense. You don't really want him doing that. Just get him out there on the outside. And I'm not trying to slander Beckham, but I didn't find him to be anywhere near as active as a blocker and willing as somebody like Malik Nabers. But I want to bring up another thing. I brought up the blocking. I want to bring up another part that stood out to me. So I talked a little bit earlier about what Matt Harmon said about how he kind of feels like he profiles as a much better after the catch receiver than a lot of these prospects because of his ability to display contact balance. And that means to bounce off tackles and create yards after first contact. And one thing that you see with a lot of those receivers who do that, Nick, are injuries. Kadarius Toney, a great example of that. But I think that from what I saw on his film, Nick, and I want to get your take on this, Nabers to me was a smart receiver. A lot of the times he did like, and I say this in a good way because a lot of people will be like, oh, he wouldn't sacrifice himself at the end of plays when he didn't need to. Like, yeah, you can get maybe an extra yard or yard and a half. He would do it if he needed to, if he thought he can get a lot more yards out of it, but he would protect his body at times where I believe you should be protecting your body. And to be honest, I think that's a big reason why you look back and there's not that many reported injuries in his history. I mean, and this is courtesy of Dave Richard, who wrote a draft profile for him, which we're going to get to in a little bit, some stats from that I thought were interesting. On CBSSports.com, you can check out really extensive draft profile. But
by the way,
I'm sorry,
this one's incomplete that I'm running, but I just wanted to show everyone the late hands. Look at where the football is. It's like right behind Renardo Green, and he's able to get his hands on it. He just doesn't get a foot down because he's elevated at the time. But I still think that's a ridiculously impressive adjustment.
And great body control, which is something that's underrated about his game. But, 100%. You look back at his injury history. He had a left shoulder injury during a camp practice, but that didn't affect him. He played through a right shoulder injury in 2023, just briefly left a game, and that was against Mississippi State. No other reported injuries, and I do believe that a big part of that for someone as physical as he is after the catch, because he really is physical, explosive player after the catch, is because he protects his body. And that's something that's really important to me because it's something we overlooked to an extent with Kadarius Toney when the Giants brought him in. We acknowledged it, Nick. We talked about it all after they made the pick, but it ended up being really bad for the Giants. This dude was injured all the time. Yeah. So it's something really important when you take these like explosive physical prospects.
It's Nicky Cut-Ups. Look at the left side of the field. I found the play that I was referencing. It was against Florida. Nice. Malik Nabers just creates that seal against number 2. Oh, yeah. Has to seal the edge.
Great blocking right here.
It's fantastic blocking. Jaden Daniels is so fun to watch.
Does he house this, Daniels? No way.
Yeah, he does.
Oh, my God, he houses that. That's
insane. Jaden Daniels insane with stuff like that. And we could do a draft profile on Jaden Daniels. Look, there are reasons to be concerned about his game, but whatever team does draft Jaden Daniels, it's going to be so exciting.
Every time get the Lamar factor where it's impossible to game plan against them. And at any point he could run it for 70 yards and a touchdown. And now you have a 17-13 win that you weren't expecting because your defense was great. And Jaden Daniels gave you a 70-yard touchdown out of nowhere. On his own. So
and I know you're not doing this, and I've seen people be like, "Oh, he's like the next Lamar Jackson." Lamar was
different players, way
better. Lamar has much better deep accuracy. He let it uncork.
Better arm talent.
He can work the middle of the field a little bit better. Yeah. So So there's that, but still, Jane Daniels is. I'm looking forward to where he goes, and I'm hoping the best for the kid.
What's going on, Big Blue Banter listeners? I'm excited for the football season for several reasons. And one of those reasons is Prize Picks, which is North America's largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform. And it's so simple to use. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including professionals, sharks, and people who are going to exploit you, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you just watch the winnings roll in. It's very simple to play and gives you a little extra skin. I've set my picks in less than 60 seconds. There are so many stats to choose from, and the withdrawals of funds are easy and quick. Dan and I will be adding a segment to our show before every game where we pick our favorite stats, more or less yards or touchdowns, what have you, and we'll be discussing why from a scheme, matchup, and game theory perspective. I love their promotions and how easy their interface is to operate at Prize Picks. I may select more on tackles for a loss from Bobby Okereke or Kayvon Thibodeau next game. They also do other sports as well. It's a really cool experience. Please join Dan and I in the fun of Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/banter and use code BANTER for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/banter and use code BANTER for a first deposit match up to $100. You will not regret it.
You ever feel sluggish or out of focus? Are you stressed? Has your digestive system caused discomfort or flatulence like a certain co-host on this podcast during a live stream? If so, you should check out AG1. When I started drinking AG1 daily, I could feel a real difference in my daily health. I had more energy, I was better off at the gym, and I could focus on my work in a much more efficient manner. That's because AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that supports your body's universal needs like gut optimization, stress management, and immune support. Since 2010, AG1 has led the future of foundational nutrition, continuously refining their formula to create a smarter, better way to elevate your baseline health. Not only did I replace my multivitamin with AG1, but I love that every scoop also includes prebiotics, probiotics, and digestive enzymes for gut support. I recommend AG1 to all my family and friends because AG1 has a team of doctors and scientists that formulate around the latest science and maintains high quality standards within the industry. Even my friends have started drinking AG1, and they always tell me how energetic they feel and how it's helped them out at the gym, and also it's helped them manage their stress levels. That's why we're happy to have AG1 as our partner. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs when you first subscribe. Go to drinkag1.com/banter. That's drinkag1.com/banter to check it out. Our mental and physical well-being is of the utmost importance. Whether you're a world-class athlete or a podcaster like me, we all need to take that very seriously. That's why I'm excited that Unified Healing is sponsoring this episode of the Big Blue Banter podcast. Unified Healing is a new and super innovative global network of wellness centers powered by Energy Enhancement System, or EE System. If you haven't heard of the EE System yet, you'll want to listen up. This technology promotes wellness, deep relaxation, purification, and rejuvenation. Whether you're here in New York, New Jersey, Arizona, if you will, or hundreds of other locations across the globe, access to a center is easy and affordable. Interested in experiencing the EE System technology for yourself? Go to unifiedhealing.com/banter to learn more and find a center near you. That's UNIFYD healing.com/banter. No material or testimonials on the Unified Healing website are intended to be viewed as medical advice or a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician
or other qualified healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment. And before undertaking a new healthcare regimen, include EE system.
Yeah, if Lamar was in this class, and I like Lamar in that class, by the way. If you guys remember back, I was
I
big on.
remember, yeah. We didn't know each other then.
No, but I was a big fan of the Giants potentially going that route if they didn't take a quarterback at 4, trading back into the first. They didn't obviously do it, but there was just a different. To me, it was different watching him at Louisville than it is Jaden Daniels at LSU, and Lamar was a better player. I'm not as high on Jaden as I maybe originally. Like, I still like Jaden. I would take him over McCarthy, but I think I would take Nabers over Jaden potentially, which is crazy to be at this point with that, Nick. And again, like, I don't know if that's definite. We're gonna go through this process more, and I want to watch more of all these guys, but it's just something that's intrigued me about where I'm at with Nabers. I really just, again, diving more into his tape, man, I just freaking love this prospect. And so I want to do a couple things before we wrap up here and keep running the tape because it's fun for the people watching. And we
Bottom of the screen, dude. This is like, oh, I love how he gets this cornerback to just set inside, set inside, tempo your route a little bit, sink your hips, explode outward towards the numbers.
God,
I mean, this cornerback loses position. He's the line inside, but geez, man. Oh,
every corner who matches up against him has to give him so much of a cushion. And then even after that, they get destroyed like this so often on tape. Like, they're giving these massive cushions to this guy to the point where, like, a lot of these routes I watch him win on the inside are just him like, all right, you're going to give me that much cushion. I'm just going to cut inside and take advantage of all of this space.
And this is one of the concerns too about Jaden. Like, this ball needs to be out in front a lot more.
Oh, yeah.
Malik Nabers has to stop to catch this football, and then that allows him to get tagged. That should be an easy touchdown, dude. He had like 5 yards of separation.
Yeah, yeah, that's like watching Beckham almost there. Is insane to watch this dude and keep running any tape you got. But what I want to do to wrap this Malik Nabers draft profile and film analysis up is, if you want to do any other plays you want to break down on tape, let's do that and do some film analysis on that. But otherwise, we can also do stats, advanced stats that are, again, courtesy of Dave Richard, but I want to talk about them a little bit on this podcast. And then
roll through the stats and I'll just bring whatever plays that I have cut.
Okay, but I want you to break that, if you can do maybe a breakdown or two of one of the plays, that'd be good. Just to get that in there as well. And then I want to ask you some big questions when it comes to Nabers and the Giants. So we always have to do that. We have to bring it back to the Giants at the end. So here's some advanced stats that I'll run through as Nick's putting up some tape, and he can maybe break down a couple plays.
Yeah, I'll break down this one because I have it up right now. We have Nabers in the slot. That's another thing about Nabers that I appreciate is he is somebody who can align in the slot. He is somebody who can align outside. We've seen him align in the backfield. Yeah, he can be used in whatever way the offense needs him, which is something I absolutely love. And this is something that, man, these poor SEC defensive backs, they had to guard him from depth when he was in the slot. And there were times where the offense dictated that the safety had to take that on, and it always led to these long ass touchdowns. There was one against Bama. There was one against, I can't remember the other school, but it's a play like this, man. It's this poor apex Texas A&M defender where Malik Nabers is just going to eat right into his cushion. And that's something that I absolutely love about him, right? And that's a beautiful pass by Jaden Daniels, who gets nailed right after he throws it. And it's just right to the outside shoulder. You could just see Malik Nabers doesn't even look like he's trying on this play. There's so much separation, and he's just gliding, man, effortlessly accelerating, and runs right underneath this football with a beautiful throw from Jaden Daniels. But man, there are just the explosive nature of Malik Nabers to be able to eat into the leverage of cornerbacks, right? When they are in off coverage. I don't think a lot of cornerbacks time it and judge it all that well. You know what I mean, Dan? Like they don't position themselves. They don't position themselves optimally, and by the time they realize that they're screwed because Malik Nabers is up into their feet and up into their cushion, they're way out of position to be able to do a smooth transition and then get back into phase on a player like Malik Nabers. And that's something that can translate to the next level, because we've seen bad cornerback play. Not everybody's Patrick Surtain. Not everyone is Patrick Surtain. You can get it. Like we saw freaking Jalen Hyatt burn Sauce Gardner in preseason, right? Like, just not anticipating the pure speed of another receiver. And Nabers has that type of speed. I think he ran a 4.35 at LSU's pro day, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
I think that just happened. It might have been
4.39.
4.39. Yes. And you could see that on tape, but it's even beyond the
4.38. Sorry, I apologize. 4.38.
No, that's fine. It's even beyond just like the pure raw speed. It's the second gear. It's the acceleration, and it's the immediate burst. Like, he can create that separation and threaten defensive backs with that speed, right? And then that's going to be a cushion. Then he runs a curl or comeback route, and he's stagnant, right? And he's Jason Garrett facing the quarterback, catches the football. Right after he does that, boom, he is getting north, man. And to your point, contact balance comes into that. It's cornerback, because how quick he is securing the football and turning, it's going to give the cornerback an opportunity to make a tackle, but he has the
They
strength
never do.
and the contact balance to shed a poor tackle attempt.
Crazy.
And he maximizes the poor tackle attempts because he is so quick securing the football and getting north.
It's nuts to watch him after, to me, in that first tackle attempt. That's what I always watch when it's always think about when I watch Neighbors. I'm like, how is this dude bouncing off every single one of these first tackle attempts? Because I don't see that often. And, Odell Beckham ran a 4.40 or a 4.41, Nick, but I think what you said is the truth of it. It's the second gear. You saw Odell Beckham Jr. on the football field in his prime. He was one of the fastest and most explosive receivers in the NFL because of the second gear. It's not just what do you do in a straight line, 4.41. There's guys who run 4.31, 4.34, whatever it may be. It's what do you do after you catch the football? It's that second gear. And that's something, or what do you do after you make your first move to get into your vertical route? Like if you're running that route, like I talked about Beckham against the Miami Dolphins from like 2015 or 2014, that play against Mizzou that you're running. I love this play. This one I put on Twitter as well. This was just watch him. You can't give that kind of space against zone to this dude. He's just going to cut inside, catch the football, and then bounce off that first tackle. And they're lucky, Mizzou, that they had another defender here that's playing with such a massive cushion that he can make the second attempt tackle.
You get caught in a cover two and you have no one over Malik Nabers except for a safety who is 12 yards off. No, this linebacker, whoever this is, tries flowing underneath. But look at the throwing window. Like Jaden Daniels knows. I think he checks to the right. He's like, oh, dude, this is going to be wide open. Once he sees the safety split here and it's going to be a cover two defense, he's like, bro, give me this all day. And Malik Nabers, man, he catches it, gets his eyes right where it needs to be. Another thing about him too, man, this isn't a body catcher. He catches with his hands. He extends away from his frame and he secures the football. And he has I didn't get his length. I don't think he has a huge catch radius, but it wasn't at the combine. He didn't measure.
No, I don't have it.
Was that at the pro day?
No, just 6 foot. Don't just have the height.
To me, like, and again, I could be way off here, but it doesn't seem like he has a huge catch radius, but it's probably in like the 40th percentile or something.
Probably.
Like it's probably a little bit suboptimal, but it's still functional and not going to be necessarily a hindrance to his play.
All right, let's do some advanced stats and get into some Giants-related questions. These are, again, advanced stats courtesy of Dave Richard from CBS Sports. He did a draft profile on Malik Nabers. He said, among the big three at receiver, Nabers, Harrison, Odunze, Nabers had the highest catch rate, the most yards after the catch per reception, and the most receiving yards per game, and the highest avoided tackle rate, albeit with the lowest ADOT. That means average depth of target. Nabers narrowly had the lowest yards per catch, just 0.2 behind Odunze and 0.5 behind Harrison. In the red zone, he snagged 9 of 19 targets for a 47.4% catch rate. I don't think the red zone is his best part of his game. It's still good, but I don't think it's the best part of his game. He said he improved. The good news is he improved on every one of the aforementioned metrics. That means red zone catch rate and then inside the 10-yard line. Another stat is on throws with under 10 air yards, he caught 51 of 67 targets, 528 yards and 4 scores. Explosive play rate on those catches was 13.4%. His avoided tackle rate, 37.3%. These are bonkers numbers, especially the avoided tackle rate of 37.3%, especially with a low ADOT. It's pretty insane. On the intermediate throws, even better. 236 yards, 18.2 per catch, 22.7 explosive rate, and a 6 yards after the catch per reception, which is insane for intermediate routes. Like a lot of these guys run intermediate routes. I know you know this, Nick, and they're just tackled after they make the catch, if they make the catch at all. This dude's averaging 6 yards after the catch on intermediate routes. That's really unheard of. It was the best. On throws 15 plus air yards, those are the deep passes. 26 of 41 targets caught, 818 yards, 9 touchdowns, 5.8 yards after the catch per reception on those. Lower than Harrison's, but higher than Odunze's out of the big three. And then this was the final stat, which I thought was very interesting, Nick, because this is very important to me, given how much, and you know this from watching so much college football for the draft, how much fake offense there is out there. I'm looking at you, Oregon, and I'm looking at some other teams. Duke, when they had Daniel Jones, I had to watch that tape. There are a lot of screens in that tape, a lot of first-read garbage, RPO stuff. But for Nabers, only 16 catches all season and only 126 yards out of all of his yards came on screens, flares, or crossing routes that were at or behind the line of scrimmage. So this is not a guy who's got manufactured yards on his production profile, which to me is very, very important and where I wanted to end from those advanced stats. Anything there? Do you want to get into some big questions?
Now we can get into the big questions. I think the yards after the catch, it's illuminating, right? I think he was in the top. I had it written down somewhere, but he's one of the top players in college football with yards after the catch at over 560, I think, yards after the catch, which is wild. And I know a lot of it might be him running down the field, but there's also just him breaking the tackles, man.
Yes.
It's a complete package to create yards after the catch. Yards after the catch is so important. You can see adjustments here too. This is difficult. This is not easy to do. You know, you have somebody from the middle of the field who's closing in on you, but look how he turns this cornerback around, which is, it's not the best technique from the cornerback. Like, you never want to just have your ass facing the quarterback. So there's no doubt about that. But he makes his catch away from his frame, spins, has to do a complete spin around, secure that football at the 5-yard line, and then fall forward through the contact for a touchdown.
Just insane to watch his body control, which is not something that people talk about a lot, but it is phenomenal. And that's another trait that people love, that you should love, that NFL GMs love. So let me get in some questions for you, Nick. Do you want hard ones or easy ones first?
Let's go hard.
All right. Where does he rank on your Giants big board right now? Your priority, what you want Nick Filato.
See, I hate to cop out of this, but I still need to watch Drake
I hate
May.
your cop outs. What'd you say?
But I still need to watch like Drake May. I still need to watch so many of those top guys, right? But like I would have Marvin Harrison above him. I would have Caleb Williams, who I watched, above him. Okay. And those are probably the only players that I've watched that I would have above him. Jaden Daniels, I don't think I would. I think I'm with you. I don't think I would have above him. I do have some concerns about Jaden Daniels. I have a higher grade on Malik Nabers, but obviously it's the quarterback position. Right. So, you know, maybe I could be talked into it, but just based on the film and where I'm at right now, I think I would value Nabers more. And so I still need to watch Odunze. I've watched.
Which Odunze have you seen?
I watched the Michigan State game before this podcast, and I watched a lot of college football and things like that too. I think I'm going to like Nabers more, but I want to reserve that judgment until I do a full evaluation, write it up, and it'll be on Giants country.
I love Odunze, and I still, even despite loving Odunze more than even a lot of people I think he's underrated based on what I've heard. Like, his tape is awesome, and he has a complete package from an analytics standpoint as well. But Nabers to me is just on a different level, not a major different level, but a slight enough above where I have Nabers above Odunze.
So I have a question for you, and this doesn't have anything to do with Nabers, but I don't think we're going to do a draft profile on this guy. And I watched a bunch of them because I watched LSU. Brian Thomas.
Yeah.
Have you watched A.D. Mitchell yet?
I have watched A.D. Mitchell.
I think A.D. Mitchell's a lot better than Brian Thomas.
Me too. I think that too.
Dude, I love
for the whole process.
We didn't talk about this at all.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to be lower on Brian Thomas than I think anyone than the consensus by a good amount. Like, he's definitely not my wide receiver 4. That's been A.D. Mitchell for like months now. I talked about this with Heath on the Dynasty podcast. That's exactly what I
didn't listen to that. So it's completely organic.
Yeah, it is organic. And I love A.D. Mitchell's film. But Brian Thomas, you finally get to see him when you watch Nabers, when you watch Jaden. I think he's still when it comes to Brian Thomas, I think actually, you know who said this best? I heard this from, I think it was one of the dudes on the Pro Football Focus podcast, because I was listening to one of their podcasts, or I saw a clip, maybe it was just a clip. And he's like, Brian Thomas would have been a much better prospect in the old NFL before teams went to the too high look and took away all the deep stuff. Because a lot of what Brian Thomas does well worked in a different version of the NFL. Like, I don't know how much I need you to win on the vertical plane and be this guy who just blows by defenders. I need you to do all these other things. And like the way A.D. Mitchell runs routes and how he's able to just use his physicality, especially over the middle of the field, like, that's not what I'm seeing necessarily from Brian Thomas. And a lot of what I'm seeing from Brian Thomas is stuff that seems to be system dependent, college football dependent. Not necessarily, that doesn't mean I don't believe in him. He still could be a good prospect. I don't know where he's going to land on my overall thing, but he's definitely not going to be wide receiver 4, which he is for most people. And I don't know if he's going to even be like 5, 6, 7 for me either.
And there are other wide receivers too that, like, I didn't do an evaluation on Brian Thomas. I just watched a bunch of his tape.
Yeah, watching Nabers and Jaden. Yeah.
Like, dude, I'm not saying Ricky Pearsall is better, but that guy is like really good.
Awesome,
like, very good.
I love it. He's been my sleeper now. He's obviously no longer a sleeper after having a good combine. But yeah, I know what you mean. Like, there's guys that I just think are better receivers, even though they don't kind of look better than him. Brian Thomas looks like he should be a wide receiver 4, 6'1", 4.34, 40-yard dash, a shit ton of stats, like tons of vertical stuff. But that's like all the stuff that doesn't necessarily, like, vertical game and stats at the collegiate level are not great for projection in my mind, really at all, based on the different rules in the college level football game and based on the fact that production just doesn't translate to being good at the NFL or not, really. Otherwise, again, Ken Dorsey would be amazing and having a 17-year career right now, and Josh Allen would be out of the NFL if we just went by stats, right? Like, that's like the reality of the situation. It's projection position for across the board, really. So yeah, it's interesting. We're going to land on receivers. We might be, outside of consensus when we finally do. So it's because I can't wait for our wide receiver podcast, like the one we did last year, where we rank our top 10, we do sleepers, breakouts, busts, and stuff like that. Like, because I think it's going to be probably different than consensus, and we may even be different than each other. But
we were different than consensus last year. You and I were very high on Tank Dell, both of us. And Tank Dell was one of the first wide receivers I watched. And I texted you and I was like, Dan, you're gonna freaking love Tank Dell.
You
Tank
knew
Dell's
that would
amazing.
be my kind of receiver.
Knew it. And
I'm pissed I wasn't as high as I should have been on him. I should have him in every dynasty league. How do I not have him in every dynasty league, dude?
I was trying, dude, in the dynasty league we're in together. I was trying to trade back in and back up into I think the late second or early third to snag him, and somebody got him right because I had 2 third-round picks in him.
Like size shit, like you want to
bet
on a size outlier? Yeah, I do want to bet on a size outlier. He wins at all 3 levels, Tank Dell. He's fucking amazing on film. Yeah, let's bet on that.
Yeah. No, Tank Dell, we were very high on Tank Dell.
He made Clayton Tune look like a prospect I had some consideration for. Like, this is obviously just laughable seeing Clayton Tune. Nah, he's a rookie. Like, give him a break. But like, I was like, Clayton Tune's not going to be an NFL quarterback, or starting quarterback, I should say. So yeah, we'll see where we land. I'm excited to do all the receivers. We're going to get into a lot of players. I mean, there's so many. I like Ricky Purcell. I love Vlad McConkey. We're going to watch his tape. I want to watch more Troy Franklin because people I respect say he's really good. There's a player who I haven't watched at all that people love, but he has a crazy off-field issues. I'm playing.
The kid from Alabama.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some people are like, his tape is like top 5 in this class if you actually just go by the tape. And so, I don't think he'll be on the Giants board probably with like that level.
So I watched the Michigan Alabama game. I wasn't focused on him, but he came up a couple times, and I was like, okay, because I've like he's somebody that's been on my list, somebody that I've wanted to watch. So I'm probably going to get into a full evaluation. But at the same time, dude, like I do a lot of this stuff with the Giants. What are the chances the Giants are going to draft somebody like that? Like it's very, very small. If we're going to
unlikely. Yes. All right, let me get in some more hard questions. You don't want to do all of them because I know you. I know the classic Nick cop. It's not a cop out though. It's like the reality. He hasn't watched all the guys, so and it's fine. And I have, I tend to make declarations sooner than I should based on what I've seen because things change then once I see stuff. Right, like my opinion today after watching just grinding I've been watching Malik Nabers before this podcast, Nick, for like 3.5 hours because I had some time today and I just watched going through games, the different games we have on the film source that we have, and just. I fell even more in love with this guy than I even expected. But let me ask you another tough question then. Where would you rank him among some of the top prospects we've seen in recent classes? For example, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith. Obviously, we're not going to put him on Jamar Chase level. I think that's fair that neither of us will do that. But maybe players who are just that close to Chase, but not quite that level.
You know what, man? It gets hard for me. I think I would have Smith and Waddle over him, but it's
okay.
Close.
Interesting. I love both of their tape.
Dude, Smith's tape was so good. The size might have like made me a pussy, but so it would be close. I would have to go back to see what my actual grade was, just going off the top of my head and like how I understood the players going in. Because Jamar Chase was my clear one in that class.
Yes.
And I think I had Waddle, and then I think I had Smith, but it was like so
you did
close.
Have Waddle then Smith. I had Smith then Waddle. I remember that.
Yeah, so I think I would have them behind that. I'm more interested in the 2022 draft class where I would have him. Last year, he would have been my wide receiver one over Jordan Addison, over Quentin Johnson, all those, or Jackson Smith and Jigba.
Much better version of what Zay Flowers was.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a really good way to put it. Jackson Smith and Jigba might have pushed him. I really like Jackson Smith and Jigba's tape.
I liked him, but not at this level.
Yes. So if we go back to 2022,
where Jackson Smith and Jigba would be great if he was in Joe Burrow's offense. Like that's what he needs. Like he needs that kind of offense. I don't know. That's kind of the thing. Why? Like same thing with Devontae Smith. I had such a high evaluation on him, and I didn't want to cut you off, but it's just interesting. Yeah. But Devontae Smith, what he wins at, like what made him look so good on tape, it's like the NFL's just changed so much. It's like there are some receivers that I think like Nabers who are kind of going to be scheme dependent and quarterback dependent in a lot of ways. Independent, I should say. Scheme independent and quarterback independent in a lot of ways because of that ability, that explosiveness, that second gear, that, contact balance. Some of these receivers are more quarterback dependent to me. I don't know where you feel about that and system dependent.
Yeah, I think every system is very different. And you look at Philadelphia, they're one of the more unique ones, right? Like we saw them have offensive issues last year. They're if you blitz them, and Wink Martindale noticed this, they were like, yo, dude, we put pressure on them. They have no answers. They have no answers. If they can't,
especially if you blitz them up the B gap and you don't let Jalen Hurts get that B gap.
Yes. If you contain Jalen Hurts, If you do a good job containing him, which Wink Martindale did, if you contain him and then you blitz him, you can control him. But you need to hold up on the back end. And the Giants did a solid job doing that. And I think A.J. Brown ended up getting hurt in he got hurt in the one game too. So that definitely affected the offense. But yeah, if you go to the 2022 draft class, so we're talking about Drake London, we're talking about Chris Olave, we're talking about Garrett Wilson, we're talking about Jameson Williams, and we're talking about I'm forgetting, I think
Treylon.
Yeah, Treylon Burks, who is probably the worst of that group right now. I don't think Jameson Williams has scratched the potential that he had. I like Jameson Williams a lot. I like both the Ohio State guys, that I like Drake London. I think Malik Nabers he would be number 1 though.
I think he'd be my number 1 in that class as well. It'd be close with him in London.
I liked both of those Ohio State guys a lot. I didn't do evaluations on them though. I don't think I did evaluations.
I didn't either. We didn't do receivers in that year. I think we were so locked in on other positions.
We were locked in on tackles and edges. That's what we did a lot of.
Which again, maybe we made a mistake there, but it is what. No, I mean, they ended up going that direction.
No, but we watched them. I just didn't do the whole I
didn't do an eval on Garrett Wilson. I feel like I was incomplete on that one because he's such a good player at the NFL level, and I feel like I didn't watch a lot of him for some reason. Don't really know why. As far as like the system fit though goes, like it's interesting to me. Like I look at a player like Jackson Smith and Jigba, who I love this tape at Ohio State too, and I know you did. You just brought that up, but I'm like, he's like, I don't like his fit in Seattle at all. They used him so poorly year 1, and like. Is he scheme dependent to some degree? I almost think he is, and that's not a bad thing. I just think you need to have, like, if you had Malik Nabers last year for the Seahawks, right? For example, instead of Jackson Smith and Jigba, I think we both agree he'd be a lot more productive than JSN was last year, right?
Yeah,
because he was running him on little like flare routes around the line of scrimmage. They would just get the ball out to JSN.
The thing about JSN that I always try to discuss when we're talking about, because it's like rookie season, people are like, I didn't really live up to it. It's like, bro, he broke his wrist in training camp and he was out for much of training camp and then into the early parts of the season. So I'm willing to give him. I watch his tape, man. He's
I like him. Yeah, his tape was good.
He's a very good football player.
Good. I just feel like he'd be so much better in a spread shotgun system like the Bengals, where you just let him win those one-on-ones in the middle of the field, and it's not just
it'd be a fun team. Now I don't know how the offense is going to be run, but the Arizona Cardinals, Kyler Murray, JSN.
That would be a good fit, Kyler Murray with JSN, the way he utilized Trey McBride on those types of routes. Yeah, and then you just have him spread shotgun. I mean, we're about to probably see Kyler Murray with Marvin Harrison, I think. We'll see if that comes true, but I think that's what we're going to see.
I think the 2019 draft class would also be a draft class that we could look at and be like, where would Nabers?
Which one was that?
That was DK Metcalf, AJ Brown,
Brown,
Deebo Samuel. And it's funny now because I'm sure, we're human, that we probably don't remember it as accurately as we did. Yeah, you know what I mean? Because these guys,
I did have AJ Brown as my clear wide receiver 1 in that class. I will say that, and I have the receipts to show it. That was the one.
I'm sorry, man. I just pulled up someone's rankings, and guess who's 3rd and 4th? 2 guys that you're going to be like, dude.
Let's see. Don't say who's ranked.
It's Metcalf, Brown, and then it's for a company, and it's not no one's name on it.
Okay, good.
And I don't even think it's I've gotten so much stuff wrong.
No, we've all gotten so much wrong.
But it's more so just how the draft. A lot of this stuff reflects the draft community. These 2 players were talked about high in the draft community. I saw one of these players.
You got to tell me.
Yeah. Oh, it was JJ Arcega-Whiteside at 3, and then Andy Isabella at 4.
Oh yeah, they were both talked up so high, especially JJ Arcega-Whiteside.
And then Akeem Butler was also on that
list.
Butler,
people we went undrafted or like 7th round or whatever it was.
Yeah, he ended up falling, but he was like a Alan Lazard kind of. Big Iowa State freaking biscuit away from being a tight end type of dude. And then it was like Deebo Samuel and players like that lower, but you also got to take into context Deebo Samuel was hurt at South Carolina.
I'll say this about Deebo Samuel, by the way, because there's been a trend, Nick, and I know you love this, of those dudes who go to the Senior Bowl and are freaking goddamn awesome against that level of competition. Deebo, Nico Collins, the list goes on and on. Puka Nacua, Terry McLaurin,
that
like,
year too.
Hit, drafted, value pick. This year, that guy is Roman Wilson of Michigan. And I got to say, watching some J.J. McCarthy lately, I really like Roman Wilson too. And he's not even really discussed anywhere near like the top 5 of these receivers. Like in another class, he might be. Like if Roman Wilson was in last year's class, he might be our guy that we'd be like way over, overexposed on, way overranked compared to the consensus on. I wouldn't, and I don't want to speak for you. He would be that way for me. I'm thinking most likely, just in what I've seen so far. I want to let you watch him, and obviously I know you're going to watch JJ, and that'll let you watch Roman Wilson. But I'm just thinking of these dudes who dominated the Senior Bowl against good level competition at the Senior Bowl, and then ended up being real big hits at the NFL level. And there's been a lot lately.
Yeah, there have been. And dude, these wide receivers, they've been from a young age, playing football. Like, it's different now. The way they're kind of coming up and playing wide receiver. Dude, offenses in high school are not playing the wing T.
Right.
I did when I was in high school. It's much different. They're being developed at a much younger age, and they're able to go to college and they play a much more spread type of system. They get a lot more experience with concepts that they're going to more than likely experience now in the NFL, because college is setting the framework for what the NFL typically adopts, right?
To an extent, yeah.
To an extent, of course. It's not going to be it's not going to be too wild. It's not going to be Oregon.
I wish, by the way, I've been saying this for years, and we'll just wrap up here. I wish college and NFL had the same rules and they didn't have the hash mark thing, because I feel like we'd have so much better quarterback play in the NFL that way, because quarterbacks would have to run more pro style systems earlier on, and they'd have to do things that translate better. And I just think the offense would be better across the board if we change the rules. That'll obviously never happen.
I wonder where Reggie Bush would have got drafted.
Right. And some of those space players, man, Steve Slayton, all those types of dudes. Like, I don't know. But anyway, we'll wrap up there. Malik Nabers, an incredible draft profile, an incredible watch. He is easily top 5 on my big board for the Giants. I currently have him number 4. That's subject to change, but I currently have him after Caleb Williams, Drake May, Marvin Harrison. Then Malik Nabers, currently over Jaden for me, over JJ McCarthy, and over Rome Odunze. We'll see if that changes as I watch more of these players as it gets close. But Nick, he is not going to give you that big board just yet, but he will eventually. I force it out of him by the time draft comes. And if you look back at some of our past years, he eventually gives a Giants draft board like around, April 25th or April. When's the draft night? It's the draft April 26th, around April 26th at 7:32 p.m. Nick is finally ready to finalize his Giants draft board. No, I'm kidding on that front, but you'll get it out of Nick eventually too. But anyway, thanks again for having fun with us, joining along. Keep it locked and loaded. More draft content on the way, more draft profiles. We're going to have interviews with people to discuss the draft as well. And we're going to get into some top 5 position breakdowns, sleepers, breakouts, busts, all the fun stuff you've seen in the past. And if you enjoyed the film breakdown here, I love Nick going down over some plays. We're going to keep doing that for these prospects too, because I thought that was a fun addition as well that we maybe not did in past years. So thanks again. Have a great rest of your week. And again, I haven't asked this in a while, but please, if you want to support the show, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. And make sure you like every video you watch. Don't just click and watch every video we see. I just saw last week we did 2 videos. They were like 5,000, 4,000 views each, and not that many likes, like in the hundreds of likes. Why can't you just click like after you watch? Because you know what will happen for us? Great things. It'll boost it in the algorithm, and it'll get us moving in the right direction. So please just help us out. Everything we ask you to do from a help standpoint will always be free for the most part. Hitting a like button free, hitting a subscribe button free. So if you do enjoy the content, that's all we'll ever ask. Thanks again. Have a great rest of your night, and we'll talk to you soon.